WW3 update. Looks like it's going to rain outside. I wish I could send that rain to you guys over there in Fort McMurray, but yeah, I can't. But anyway, yeah, just a little update on that. Yeah, that fire is now, I think, 1,000. So it's getting pretty big. And, well, it's not getting pretty big. That's pretty ginormous. It's probably the size of 10 times the size of Calgary right now. So to give you a kind of perspective, if you're in Ottawa, it'd be about 3 times the size of that. Ottawa's probably a little bit bigger. I don't know. Maybe Calgary's probably more spread out, I think. So maybe it's bigger than Ottawa. I kind of trying to think geographically. It's been a long time since I've been in Calgary. It's expanded a lot since I last been there. So many decades ago. Anyway, yeah. So last night, jumping onto the World War III thing, I'll just jump right into and I already covered another video for all the details on it, but China's sending 5,000 troops to Syria to fight ISIS. This comes amidst a bunch of things that the U.S. was doing, preparing for the election or whatever. It sounded like there was going to be, from the U.S. side, they're hinting at kind of, and this is one thing John Kerry is very bad at, is always hinting at what they're going to do before they do it. And it gives China and Russia, maybe, like I say, maybe the world is a stage and they're just signaling so that you know well ahead of time so that you can, counter us so we don't look bad. I don't know, but either way they look bad. So what they're saying is that, okay, Obama sent in 250 troops, Navy SEALs. These guys are fighting with, supposed to be fighting with the Kurds. One has been killed so far. Now, he sent in another 250 troops. So I'm thinking what the Russians and Chinese are thinking is they're going to slowly saturate these troops. These troops, they're open-ended. They can stay there for indefinite. So now we have another U.S. soldier basically dead in a war over nothing. That the U.S. really has nothing to do. The world elite, there are no good guys in this. I know there's some people that want to go, no, well, these guys are the bad guys. No, they're all bad guys. All the governments in the world have failed the people. Every government in the world has failed the people miserably. Some more miserable than others. But there are no good guys, and that's what I mean by no good guys. And I'm usually talking about the governments, not the actual people of the place, because the people really, how much say do they really have, right? But that said, ISIS was getting its ass kicked pretty bad by Russia, enough to give the SAA, the Syrian Arab Army, more than almost 6 months of training or 4 months of training, a new weapon and equipment from Russia to Syria, and it seems like they can handle ISIS pretty good now. Daesh, ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them. They're all the same group anyway. They're all funded by the same people. We know that the Russians are really, there's a bit of a scramble for resources out there in Syria too. You have to understand that the Russians are taking strategic oil fields and stuff like that. And if the Russians have them, now the Chinese coming in, the Chinese are putting actual boots on the ground. God help the ISIS guys for that, right? Because the forces that they're sending in these guys are top notch. Now the thing is China's never really fought in a desert conflict. This is kind of why this is such a big thing is naming the last time China's invaded another country or basically put boots on the ground in a foreign policy dispute. It's very, very rare for China to do this. They tend to play their cards close to their chest and very covert. They usually, yes, they've been in on this all along. They've been sending weapons to Saudi Arabia to fight the Houthis, which is kind of a strange thing going on because on the back end you have Iran and Russia helping them, arming the Houthis to destabilize Saudi Arabia. So why destabilize Saudi Arabia? Well, this is where the Chinese card kind of comes in. China has lots of investments in oil in Saudi Arabia. The fields that China is invested in is in this disputed area. Now, I'm thinking the Chinese are doing a long con on this as well. I think what happened, this goes back to 2012 when the Saudis said that they would be selling oil outside the US dollar. In other words, a threat to the petrodollar. Threatening the petrodollar gets your country blown up. That's what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. They didn't overthrow him for the women and children and democracy and because he was a dictator. They did it because he was going to go to a gold-backed dinar. and the giant aquifer and pump water throughout the Middle East, which God forbid would stabilize the region. And he was going to do all kinds of stuff like that. In other words, it would have been a threat to the petrodollar. If you understand the petrodollar, you understand a debt-based economy. Debt and debt-based economy is all the United States has left. Most Americans are waking up to this fact, and they understand it now. More and more are understanding it now, because it's becoming more clearer to vision. It's even on to the point where it's becoming more mainstream. They're talking about economic collapse more frequently on. It's getting impossible to hide the collapse. People are starting to notice that they're more poor. Job losses are in the astronomical. Even some people are suggesting what's going on in Fort McMurray right now, which I will tie that in with the oil. It just, even Alberta, the oil fields around BC, apparently the fire's heading that way. I'm thinking arson probably might have something to do with this. It just comes at a time when Saudi Arabia pumping so much oil on purpose to destabilize basically Iran and Russia, because they were exporting more oil, particularly exporting oil to Europe from Gazprom from Russia. And you have to understand, Syria is more of a war against Russia and China than and Iran to a degree too, because Iran is a stepping stone to attack China. I know it. You have to follow this channel for a while to but if I keep going over the same thing over and over, at this point you should know this. But if you don't be afraid to go over some of my older World War III updates, because it explains that. But Iran is the stepping stone. This goes back to the 2009 when what the heck, the CIA director there was out there on TV saying, yeah, we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years or whatever. And Syria is the holdup right now. And when Syria falls, Iran is next. That's why there's so much rhetoric to get us into a war with Iran. Iran hasn't attacked another country in over 200 years. Their threats towards Israel it's mutual. I mean, Israel's constantly talking about preemptively striking Iran. Iran says, well, we'll wipe you off the map if you do. Chicken and egg, right? Who started it? Doesn't matter. But the thing is until Israel makes that preemptive strike against Iran, which is a death sentence to Israel, Iran is now in a position where that is almost off the table for the Israelis. They don't need nuclear weapons in Iran to wipe Israel off the map. They could do it in 5 minutes if they wanted. They've got the underground bunkers. They're 1,500 feet down, 500 feet long. There's no bunker busters or nukes that can take out these underground bunkers, and they're full of rocket systems. And the thing about it is the launch, they can launch them from inside. And we're talking 1,200 long-range rockets that could reach to southern Europe, let alone Israel. And Iron Dome, the THAAD system or whatever, would not even come close to stopping a barrage, because it would be multi-pronged, not just from Iran, but it would probably, Iran and Syria having a defense pact, I could see much artillery being blasted into right from the Syrian border if they wanted. It would be a two-step, uncounterable. The United States would not be able to save Israel in time. So I think the Israelis know this by now. Okay, they're not going to dominate the region with the Greater Israel Project. Erdogan is out of control. There's no doubt about that. And yes, about 80 million Turks are going to be having free travel throughout Europe pretty soon. So you thought the refugee crisis was bad. Well, the Ottoman Empire 2.0 is coming in. And this is openly stated by the Turks. If you haven't been watching what's going on in Turkey, it's been kind of crazy. He's a complete madman. And yes, he's been talking about the rise of the Ottoman Empire. So, yeah, that's the kind of crazy world we live in. But getting back to Saudi Arabia, where does Saudi Arabia, a lot of people don't realize, but Saudi Arabia and Israel are one country in a sense. Saudi Arabia is really technically either in two-step or run by Israel. A lot of people don't realize. I didn't know this myself, but the Saudi royal family are pretty much Zionists. They are connected to Israel. This is something that Saudi citizens can tell you. This is stuff that you're never going to see on the mainstream media. And that's why two countries that completely oppose each other have not attacked each other. When you consider the radical Islam in Saudi Arabia, the Sunnis that are, the Wahhabists and the Salafists and the Baathists and all those that are really, really radical, why they never attack Israel. When every time, you ask any jihadist, what's their number one goal in life? To martyr themselves, blowing up Israel. They'll all tell you that. So with ISIS, who keeps going in mainly through Turkey, but you have to understand the weapons that the ISIS fighters' safe haven is in Turkey. They run back and forth across the border. This is so openly exposed now. There's no way to hide it. But yet, Turkey is still a part of NATO. But that's, again, because they're close to Russia, and they can destabilize Russia. That's why they're destabilizing Armenia and Transnistria, which, if they can destabilize those two countries, Turkey can just run right through, be right on Russia's border. But I'm going to get into that region in a second, but I got to get back to Saudi Arabia. Because Saudi Arabia basically is the ones where the CIA, and this is openly admitted by the CIA at this point, and many congressmen, and there was a lady congresswoman, I guess, that just, kind of is talking about the mad regime of Barack Obama and how they're funding ISIS and stuff. This is coming right from the U.S. Congress. Conspiracy theory, I think not. It doesn't get any more official than that. But anyway, the CIA takes the money, they give it to Saudi Arabia, and then they move weapons from NATO to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia then gives U.S.-made TOW missiles. Case in point, a couple of years ago, ISIS just happened to stumble on a whole bunch of U.S.-made anti-tank TOW missiles and Stinger missiles in Syria. Well, number one, how does American-made U.S. missiles get into Syria when Syria never bought U.S. equipment, military equipment? They buy Russian stuff. That's it. They might buy Iranian stuff, but they buy Russian stuff. They don't buy. So there's only one way it's going to get there, right? And ISIS. If you've been following this channel, if anybody should be playing the lottery, it's ISIS members. They accidentally get. I forget how many airdrops it was. I think there's like 15 by now, by helicopter, and we're talking Globemaster airplanes. These Globemasters, okay, you're not sitting in that cockpit unless you've probably got minimum 400 hours of experience in that thing. Just on that airplane, let alone probably a few thousand hours before that in training. The payload experts, the navigators, these people don't get lost. They drop where they're told to drop. They don't accidentally drop to the wrong people. They never do. They never have. But they're told where to drop. There's been more than enough Iraqi reports, and this is why the Iraqi government is so distrustful as well. They got several reasons to be distrustful of the U.S. government. But one of the big things is that they've witnessed, and they've even shot down, the Iranians and the Iraqis have actually shot down a U.S. helicopter about a year or so ago that was supplying weapons to ISIS and food and what have you. You have United Nations convoys and the George Soros-funded White Helmets bringing in food convoys that go directly to ISIS. Now we have Cameron over there in Great Britain who's talking about dropping food in for the refugees and stuff like that. Now, they say that, but it always seems to end up in the hands of ISIS. And they know this, but they don't change the game plan. Now, that said, if it's negligence, fine. But once you know the jig's up and you've screwed up the plan, you change the plan. They don't change the plan. Tells me that is the plan. Think about it. You got jihadists from all over the Middle East, all over a lot of them coming in from Saudi Arabia, a lot of them coming in from Turkey. Many of them coming in through Libya. That's one of the reasons why Libya was destabilized, and that's why they're going back again. And of course, the disaster in Libya is a humanitarian crisis beyond, like, Hillary Clinton, the entire regime there, Barack Obama, the entire regime there. Yes, George Bush. Get them all. They're all criminals. They all need to go to jail, minimum. They all need to be one charge: crimes against humanity. And if there's any brave law enforcement military out there, these people are so easy to round up. They're not beyond the law. They're just people. Round them up. You arrest people for stealing candy bars. You arrest people for jaywalking. Killing 1.5 million people in a faulty war, I think, is worthy of some chrome bracelets. You know what I'm saying? And then you charge them with crimes against humanity, but you sentence them in the countries of origin. For example, George Bush should be sentenced in Iraq. One charge: crimes against humanity. All options on the table. Let him go. Give him death. Whatever. Hold them accountable for every person, 25 years to life, no possibility of parole, contact to the outside world. These people are too dangerous to let contact to the outside world. You do this for Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger, I would send him to Vietnam, get some reparations there, let the Vietnamese people try him for a faulty war there, for the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That never happened. Killed 58,000 Americans. Again, you're saying it's okay for him to kill 58,000 Americans and, how many million Vietnamese. You're saying for George Bush it's okay to kill 1.5 million Iraqis on a lie. Oops, my bad. His exact words: oops, my bad. We didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. Oops, my bad. like it's a big joke. 1.5 million people, and people still suffering. You know, like the long-term effects of that are just unbelievable. So you're saying that's okay? That's not okay. Libya, how many thousands dead? Syria, this is John Kerry, John McCain. John McCain, pictures with the leaders of ISIS. Oh, these are my friends. These are good people. The man is a criminal. Zebra Brzezinski sent him to Afghanistan. Because of him, the Mujahideen and Al-Qaeda and stuff were created. That man is an unbelievable criminal. He has a hand in every one of these. And of course, you have your George Soros, who funds neo-Nazis in the Ukraine to overthrow there. Everywhere George Soros money goes, death and destruction follows. This man is a genocidal maniac. They all are. Obama, same thing. Obama, I would try him in Libya. I think Hillary Clinton and Obama need there. Bill Clinton, Sarajevo, was it Syria? Not Sarajevo, but where they back in the 90s there, where they anyway there, Serbia or Sarajevo or Croatia, Bosnia, I think it was one of those countries anyway. He went in, again, same thing, death and destruction, right? These were not democratic plans. These were not to install democracy and freedom for the people. No, these are regime changes to rip the resources out of the ground, off the people, to control the region for the central banking systems. And the central bankers don't even get me started on that. But anyway, getting back to Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is now in a position where they're pumping oil to destabilize Russia. It also destabilizes here in Canada and the United States fracking system. The idea is to have hegemony, to make oil so cheap that you can't compete with it. But they're told to do this by U.S. foreign policy. That's why they're told to do this. Now, the thing is because Saudi Arabia has no friends, they're in a rock and a hard place. As soon as they started doing this, earlier last year, or later last year, they started ending up with this Houthi problem. All of a sudden there was this uprising of Houthis. Where did they come from? Iran is definitely backing them. So you have a half proxy war going on where Iran is fighting Saudi Arabia without lifting a finger. Now, for those of you who hate Iran, I get it. You listen to CNN and you buy into the propaganda and stuff like that. Whatever. Would I ever want to live in Iran? No, not my kind of area to live in. But they're not bugging anybody. They can do their things. As long as they do it over there, I don't care. Do they support radical? Name me one Middle Eastern country, including Israel, that does not support radicals. Zionism is every bit as radical as jihadism. It is. And it's all dangerous. It's all dangerous. There's no place in the Middle East I'd want to live. There is no democracy in the Middle East. It's all dictatorships. It's all bad stuff, and it's all tribal wars. You know, they go back. They go back. You know, biblical times. They go back. But the thing is with Saudi Arabia, because they have no friends, by trying to undercut Russia and Gazprom, because remember, there's a pipeline that was supposed to go through, and Bobby Kennedy even talked about this. I think it's Bobby Kennedy, whatever Kennedy's still alive there, talking about the way it was supposed to go was this. There was supposed to be an oil pipeline coming from Russia, through Armenia, through Turkey, through Syria, through Iran. I guess they would negotiate with Pakistan right through to China. Nice direct route that way. Pretty much, right? Then the Syrian war happened. Now, Bashar al-Assad, he has, again, the chemical weapons. Is he using chemical weapons against his people? I don't think so. It always comes out after, by the UN. I mean, there are some, I am very critical of the UN, but the people that aren't they're compartmentalized, so they don't know what the big game plan is. But there are people out there that in the UN that don't know what's going on, and they're actually doing their job the way they're supposed to. And they keep saying, no, it's the rebels, not Assad using chemical weapons against his people. And the barrel bomb thing is like, okay, so a 500-pound or 750-pound free-fall bomb is less effective than a 50-gallon barrel of drum. You know, the bomb doesn't really matter. Barrel bombs, it's such a ridiculous thing. If you're bombing ISIS or Al-Qaeda, whatever you want to refer to them as, do you really care what the bomb is? In fact, the more powerful, the better. Get rid of those bastards. Now, bombing civilians, it is a war, and the Syrians do lack some of the guided precision that the Russians have. Now, as far as the Russians killing civilian after civilian after civilian, there just doesn't seem to be any evidence of that. I'm sure they've killed some. I mean, you cannot the Russian firepower is unbelievable there. And that's like just a tip of the, that's a handful of airplanes. It really is. It's less than a dozen airplanes. They send out one and it levels a city block, you know what I mean? But they always give the get the hell out of Dodge before we bomb it. And yeah, anybody that stays in those areas, they get bombed to oblivion. So for the most part, no, the Russians, I'm sure they've killed civilians. The hospital incident, it did turn out to be the American A-10s. The rooftop bombings that they're doing to flush people out. What they're doing now, what NATO's doing now, and the coalition forces, is dropping a bomb just high enough to burst above the rooftops to scare people out of the cities. Well, that's just going to make people hunker down in fear. You're going to kill more people that way. So, yeah, it is what it is. The proof is very overwhelming. No, it's kind of a weird thing, and I can imagine a U.S. pilot and Navy pilots are, I'm just going to let that ring, are getting really ticked at this too, is that they sit there ready to take off and fly and go bomb ISIS, and they're told to stand down until it's too late, then they run out of fuel, they refuel the jet, they take off, and the target's gone. And they've been doing this for a while now. So the military knows what's going on there. That's why a big stand down is needed. But the other thing is, I'll just let it ring there. It used to only ring 3 times, now it rings like a million times. Who'd be calling this early anyway? There we go. So anyway, yeah, so with these Navy SEALs, what are they in there for? I don't know. I don't know, are they really helping the Kurds? You're helping the Kurds on one hand while Turkey, Erdogan over there in Turkey, is having the Kurds shelled. They're shelling hospitals. Heck, they're even shooting refugees, Syrian refugees coming across to Turkey. And yet the international community says nothing to Turkey. Why? Well, they're our ally. At some point, the evil that goes on is unbelievable. And if they're doing that, are they really an ally? Well, I'll tell you why they're an ally, because the only goal is to overthrow Assad. That's it. Assad's a dictator, Assad's this, Assad that. Again, out of nowhere, the arming of these so-called moderate rebels. I mean, the Free Syrian Army did exist at one point, but how did it start? It started with funding from George Soros. Yes, you can track it right back. The weapons came in, John McCain, and then, of course, Obama. So you got CIA guy after CIA guy saying, you had 4,000 ISIS fighters trained up in Jordan with Israeli Mossad. You have Mossad agents that have come out, and there are good Israeli Mossad agents out there. There are good people on, I think Steve Pachenik is right. He says there's a battle going on behind closed doors in the system, so to speak. And you're never going to see the good guys because they can't come out into the light. So he says, but they are there. And there's a lot of good guys in Israel that are going against their own government. 2 generals, Mossad generals, have been arrested a couple of months ago for saying, yeah, we created ISIS. And it's to overthrow Assad, but these guys are so out of control. Mind you, if they really want them gone, trust me, there's 2 things. Number one, you've got jihadists, okay? A lot of these guys are mercenaries. But mercenaries are getting paid. These people aren't rich. Most of them are dirt farmers living in caves with rusted out AKs. Number one, their AKs never run out of ammo. So that's Saudi Arabia funding that. The other thing is, or bringing in the ammo for that, and Turkey and the rest of them. The other thing, too, is an army marches on its stomach. This goes back to Roman times. An army marches on its stomach. Who the hell is feeding them? Well, we know the United Nations is how. I mean, think about it. There's a food shortage in Syria right now because of all the bombing going on. In some areas of Syria, you wouldn't even know there was a war going on. But in a lot of all the major cities, there's a war going on, and everybody's starving. That's a big problem. So if all the civilians are starving, how come these jihadists aren't starving? Because, again, the United Nations, NATO, it's one system. It sounds like a separate organizations, but Rockefeller, Rothschild, they're all owned by the same people at the end of the day. And they're run by the same people. It's a handful of douchebags in the world that really mess it up for the rest of the planet. Now, getting back to Saudi Arabia one more time, China's coming in on this, and I think a deal must have been made behind closed doors, and there's a lot of things going on even in Europe right now where the United States they're being isolated. They're excluded from talks between Russia, Netherlands, and a few other countries, I think Germany and France or whatever, are in on this talks about a deal in Syria, whatever. And I'm thinking, well, the Saudis probably seen the writing on the wall. If they save the petrodollar, the Russians will take them out by just keeping a proxy war going with the Houthis. And just, Russia just has to keep backing Iran. That's all they have to do. Now, again, the Russians don't have to lift a finger here. Now, there's another problem. China's invested interest, like we said. China doesn't want to lose its oil fields. So, okay, well, how about this? We'll save Saudi Arabia if they let us take out ISIS, but you sell your oil to us now, and you ditch the petrodollar. So Saudi Arabia ditching the petrodollar, they're going to do this out of self-preservation anyway. They have to, because if they ditch the petrodollar without, and I think this is what the Saudis were probably waiting for all along, to know that the Russians and Chinese have their back. This is kind of a scary thought, thinking how unstable Saudi Arabia is. But there's going to be a lot of concessions for Saudi Arabia. I think the cleansing of Saudi Arabia will begin very shortly. And here's why I say that. While Turkey is putting the THAAD systems and all throughout the South Pacific, there's the THAAD systems, which is basically like the Iron Dome and the Patriot missile system. They're going throughout there, and China's not happy on this. China's just blocked the U.S. aircraft carrier and a warship from docking in Hong Kong. The Russians and Chinese are about to do a massive naval drill together in the South China Sea, saying, well, if Taiwan and the U.S. could be in that region, we're going to do it too. But this time, there's something else. The Russians have also deployed Iskander missiles to the west coast, to the east coast of Russia, meaning they're going to be closer to Japan, they're going to be closer to South Korea, North Korea, that area, and they're deploying to there. And people are worried about the Iskanders. They can be conventional and take out ships from shore, but they can also be armed with nukes, and they have like a 500-kilometer range. It's 300 miles. So when you're looking at it like that, that is a big deal. That is a big deal for NATO to deal with. Now, the other thing is that Russia's also building up on its borders, which it's allowed. It's in its own country. It's allowed. But they've also been putting a huge emphasis on anti-terrorism training for the Caucasus regions, and basically all the areas where China right now is hubbed with. Mongolia, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and a few other areas right at the corner of top of Russia. And this is where Turkey said that it would send in, the Muslims in that area, the radical Muslims in that area, arm them, and then they would go up and destabilize the Russian borders. The Russians are ready to counter. They've already got Chechen rebel forces, or Chechen anti-terrorism forces. In training, they got them training up in the Arctic. They got them training all over the place. That said, we know about the missile drill, the submarine missile drill that's Russia did up in the Arctic. So again, Russia's got its areas covered. So the United States you could see the early steppings of it through Armenia and what's called right beside it there. Brain fart on the name there. But anyway, and if it goes from there, it goes right across. In Afghanistan, all those places again, it'll go right across, and it'll be right completely destabilizing on Russia's southern border or China's northern border. So the Chinese, I think that's why they're getting out ahead of it, because if they are stopping ISIS there, then ISIS can't go through Saudi Arabia, and they cannot get to China. So meaning the Chinese are going to go in. Again, I don't know how good the Chinese forces are going to be in the desert, but I mean, these guys are they can fight in they train in mountainous regions. They train in open land combat. I think the Chinese will be pretty darn good in. I don't know how they'll be in extreme desert warfare, because they don't have that in China. So, well, they do have desert there, but open area, I think they're, like you're going to see artillery barrages beyond, human comprehension. Remember, the largest artillery barrage in history was Canada with 1,050 guns in the opening mornings of World War I. Next to that, the second largest was North Korea about a month ago and that was 100 guns at once, or 100 and some odd guns at once. This is in one battery, so to speak, right? That said, what would China bring to Syria? I think the sweep would be, and this is something I said, I didn't expect China to. I expected the Russians to do it, and the Russians still have special forces in there too. And remember, what China's going to be doing is locking down. They're going to, again, the Syrian Arab Army is going to do the heavy lifting. It's just they're going to be backed by China. They're going to have boots on the ground intelligence by China, and an air power of Russia. that means all the oil fields, all the resources. Remember, the U.S. and the NATO and all that bombed out all the reason why there's no food in Syria is because they bombed the granary, the grain stores. They bombed the oil refineries. They bombed any infrastructure that Syria can use to build itself, rebuild itself. Water, you name it. It's all been bombed by NATO, not Russia. And of course, the rebels have blown shit up too. But again, who backs them, right? Again, just look at the brands on the of weaponry, and you figure it out pretty quickly. Now that said, well, yeah, but everything else is Russian made. Yeah, Russians are corrupt too. Again, there's no good guys. I'm not saying Russia and China are the good guys here. They're in there for their own interest. This is an empire war. Think of the world divided into two regions: the transatlantic Anglo-American Empire versus the Eurasian Pacific Empire, and they're just fighting for hegemony. Us little groundlings don't matter to any of these people. But that said, Syria, Assad's not going anywhere. And what's going to happen to me, in my opinion, what I think is going to happen, is we know Russia is talking about rebuilding Syria for like 950 million, or 950 billion. That's it. They're going to rebuild the entire country for that price. China is also going to put a 300 billion or 30 billion, or really not that much. So when you think about the infrastructure that was destroyed in Syria, monetary-wise, a lot of the places that are bombed out are mortar, brick and mortar. So it's not really high infrastructure stuff that's been blown up anyway. It's just a lot of human cost, right? But that said, the investments and of course Iran is going to be getting investment in this. They will rebuild that area again, and at some point, yes, they're going to push all these mercenaries back into Libya, which I think is going to happen, or back into Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia, if they fail this mission, their own minions are going to turn on them. I think this is where China comes in again. China, again, backing the Saudis to fight the Houthis for their oil interests. So probably China and Russia said, look, the Chinese said, look, you're destroying our... How about we get the Saudis to give us all their oil? Okay, we'll be the number... that keeps them happy. And, they're still going to buy, I think Russia is still the number one exporter of oil to, their number one export is to China for oil. Maybe Europe, I'm not sure, but, everything's going to China. And whatever. So, okay, if that makes them happy, fine. But they're going around, right now, the petrodollar is not needed for a lot of these countries. And that's where the real war, that's why the United States as a government is trying so hard to get a war going with Russia or China. But they can't fire first. The Russians and Chinese, they're smart. They know this. That's why if Russia wanted to start the war, they've had so many opportunities. Heck, Turkey shot down a Russian jet. That could have started a nuclear war right there. Not instantly, but I could be thinking of a Russian warship would probably put us on extremely high alert. You have analyst after analyst. I'm not talking guys like me. I'm talking people that get paid to do this in government positions saying, we are closer to a thermonuclear war now than we've ever been in history. Jacob Rothschild, this is one of the big players in the world that makes all this stuff happen. Even he said that. It's just like right before World War II. Now, the problem is the real culprits are the bankers. The bankers, the Rothschild banking system. This is the stuff. Even Donald Trump come out today saying, rather than, and I'm glad he said this, saying an economic collapse is going to happen, but we can divert it by giving people the full value of their currency, something along that lines, and whatever. And of course, you know what the bankers say? Oh, don't do that. Interest rates will go through the roof. What interest rates? Again, the destabilization of oil here in Canada. It's going to be the Fort McMurray fires do help out the climate change group. This is a blessing for them. Why? You've destroyed the oil patch. That's number one. Making it less viable to start it up again. Number two, all those people that were going to lose their jobs and not pay the homes, now you've got a bailout for the banks. Again, why? Defaulted mortgages. All these insurance, think of all the insurance right now. 1,600 buildings plus in Fort McMurray burnt down. I bet you every one of them had insurance on it. Fire, theft, whatever. Now, how they're going to screw the people out of the insurance, I don't know. But yes, the insurance companies are going to make off like bandits. They're going to get a government bailout. So, coincidentally, they just seem to luck out on this. So again, the big guys get bailed out, not the little guys. Insurance companies are a scam anyway. But I'm not saying that the Fort McMurray fire was set on purpose, but it is so convenient that it would go now. And this, again, low growth for Canada. I said Trudeau would sink the economy in 8 months, but I think it'll be faster. Now, I'm not blaming Trudeau for this per se. I don't think he's even in on the loop. But it's just so convenient that this is going to have such catastrophic effects on the Canadian economy, especially out in that region. So, yeah, you can see it. So they'll be able to use that. So when the economy turns, it's because of the Fort McMurray fire. That's what it's going to be. The worst thing that could happen for the globalists right now in Fort McMurray is it to rain. You know what I mean? Like if that goes out and they can start patching things up and rebuilding and whatever. Yeah. Now, mind you, there will be jobs out of the reconstruction. There's no doubt about that. But will Fort McMurray actually be rebuilt? That's the question now, isn't it? You know what I mean? Basically, a city just got wiped out. A city pretty much just got wiped out in Canada. Think about that. That's something that's pretty heavy. And our oil sector is now pretty much done. We don't have an oil sector right at the moment. You know what I mean? Like there is still stuff going on. You have like Hibernia out in the east. Okay, I would with Hibernia being probably the second big area for. I mean, it's not just Fort McMurray. There's a whole bunch, but that's a big one, right? So if you see, for example, if Hibernia oil platform over there in Newfoundland, off the coast of Labrador, Newfoundland, catches fire in the next couple of weeks, then you know Fort McMurray was a planned event. You know what I mean? Like, there's not going to be that much of a coincidence. It's like the rash of Warren Buffett-owned train derailments last year. All these train derailments. Again, it's corporate espionage, sabotage. That stuff does go on. You can't rule it out. I'm not saying it is 100% because there's no way to prove it. But the convenience of all this stuff to make for hard economic times. I mean, the Canadian dollar was starting to rise to the U.S. dollar. That type of thing. Saudi Arabia, again, pumping all this oil out not needed. They need to, destroy the reason why they need to destroy it is because if people get the idea in their head, well, why don't we just nationalize it instead of buying oil from Saudi Arabia? It won't matter how much they pump if we don't buy it. We just use our own. I mean, we got it here. Why are we buying it from there? Oh, that's cheaper. Yeah, but the jobs are here. You see what I mean? That's the whole point from globalization is not to have the jobs here. It's too expensive. They don't like competition. So that's the thing. So I think China's and Saudi Arabia have made a deal. We won't wipe you off the map, or we won't let the U.S. wipe you off the map if you basically give us your oil. Well, they'll pay them for it, but you're going to pay them in anything but U.S. treasuries. The Chinese are getting U.S. treasuries. The yuan renminbi, the Chinese currency, is now not convertible to the U.S. dollar. That's what they're saying. I don't know if that's all done deal now, but that's the deal that they're going to do. So that means you're either dealing with China or you're dealing with the United States. Now, the Chinese are just as corrupt, don't get me wrong. Their economy, it's the fastest growing economy in the world, to a degree. And then next week, oh my God, they're going to collapse, Oh, it's the fastest growing economy. Oh my God, they're going to collapse, And that's what you hear from, it's inflated. It's just as corrupt. There's not one government around the world that's actually doing the right thing with their people, with the exception of possibly Iceland. And even at that, there's only so much they can do. But yeah, this globalization thing is very, very dangerous. So we'll have to keep an eye on what's going on there. And I think the China move here is just that I wouldn't say it's a desperate move. I think it's a well-planned move. I don't think it's a desperate move. I don't think it's an 11th hour move. I'm thinking it was when the U.S. does this, when they start to invade, because they're building up the invasion for Libya. The invasion of Libya is a precursor to the invasion of Syria, full boots on the ground by the U.S. But if you have Chinese troops all over the place, you're talking 5,000, you can spread those guys out pretty good. And you got Russian troops all over the place. The international incident of shooting Russian and Chinese troops when they are already actively taking out ISIS on the international community. Remember, Syria is still a sovereign country. The United States is in there without any congressional backing or anything. There is no, even the UN has not given them the go-ahead to go into. It's an illegal war, just like Libya, another illegal war, Iraq, illegal war. These are all illegal wars. The only ones that have the legal right to be in Syria, next to the Syrians and the Syrian army, is Russia and China because they've been given permission. The United States has not. So, in other words, it's an invasion from the West. And same, even Canada's guilty of this. We don't have permission to be there. That type of thing. So, unfortunately, there are no good guys, but we're lesser of good guys in that sense. Now, the soldiers on the ground, I'm not doubting them because they're being lied to, too. They're probably told okay, you're there to fight ISIS. Really, what they're there to do is take strategic points and get into clashes with the Syrian Arab army, guaranteed. But to take oil fields, to take infrastructure. Why? That's what's valuable in the country. That's what's going to rebuild the country. If the Russians and Chinese control the oil fields and control the wheat fields, or the grain silos and all this stuff, and power stations and all that, if they're protecting all that stuff, the U.S. can't bomb that stuff. And if they can't bomb that stuff, then the country can rebuild. And the goal is for the country not to rebuild because of the Greater Israel Project. I'm going to have to do a video on that one very soon, because it is very important to the whole key of what's going on there. So that said, the plans are foiled at this point to a good degree. And this, we'll have to see how, because the Chinese said they were going to do this last year, they didn't. But now it looks like it's a go-ahead. They even got the force name. You can watch the previous video on the subject and stuff like that. But I think they're coming to the aid of Saudi Arabia. I think a deal has been made. So that means Saudi Arabia, somewhere in the near future, is going to ditch the U.S. dollar. That's my prediction. I don't know how. They're just going to announce it, but they would not do this unless they knew they had the backing of the Russians and Chinese. And right now, Saudi Arabia and Russia don't play well together. We know this. Again, Prince Bandar. Is he even still alive? Anybody heard from this guy? He just disappeared a couple of years ago. Not too long after he threatened the Russians too. It's nobody, everybody, all my commenters from that region of the world are like, well, we know he wasn't well. No, we come to think, but no, we haven't heard from him at all. Maybe the royal family probably put him down because he was too much of a loose cannon. So that said, we'll have to see what game Saudi Arabia plays. But you have to understand too, at some point, those treasuries, they're starting to come home. Now, yes, I agree with Harry Dent, and this is something that everybody's hyperinflation. I don't think it's the hyperinflation that's going to get the U.S. It's the stagnation. And here's what I'm talking about. When China starts, and they are sending U.S. treasuries home, they're dumping them like crazy. The only people that are buying them is the U.S. Nobody else is taking on U.S. treasuries. And we know the United States has a death and debt-based economy. You take their currency or you get democracy, JDAMs. That's the way it works. A lot of people are waking up to this. They don't, I can't imagine what it is for a lot of the U.S. people that know this. They're like, oh my God, my government's, they're genocidal. Why? Because if that money if they don't keep printing money, the whole thing will kind of come down. Now, if they stop printing money, okay, the thing just comes to a standstill, stagnation. If they destroy the money, yes, you're destroying the inflation, but you still have stagnation. Why? There's no job growth. That's the problem. Now, this is why I think, why is there no job growth? Because all your good jobs are over there somewhere. NAFTA, Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, the TTIP, all those things. North American Union. Those things, again, North American Union takes jobs from Canada, sends them either to the United States or Mexico. It takes jobs from the United States, sends them to Mexico. Again, Bombardier and Air Canada, all these jobs going to Mexico. Those are crown corporations. They should stay here. If they're too expensive to run, then we need open competition within the country. But if it's going to be bailed out by the country, it should at least benefit the country. That type of thing. So that's the problem with too big to fail, is that it always fails at some point, no matter how much you prop it up. And yes, the bankers, central bankers, are getting really crazy. You can just listen to their rhetoric. That's why you have world elites, scrambling away to their bunkers as we speak. They know the pitchfork revolution is coming. That's why they want to use divide and conquer to get as many people distracted on issues of race and gun control and all that, and fighting each other on that. But I think a lot of people are coming to the realization that they understand what divide and conquer is, and they know who the enemy truly is, and they have names, that type of thing. And these people, obviously being, we call them New World Order, Illuminati, lizard people, whatever you want to call them. I just call them extremely corrupt people. They're going, like Hillary Clinton. How's she not in jail right now? People are saying, okay, well, if it was any other person, she had broken the law. If I did the things Hillary Clinton did, I would be in jail. So how is this woman staying out of jail? How come? I mean, the evidence is so overwhelming. And even if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter, when you break the law, you break the law. You go to jail. But it seems like it's a libertine society. The laws are meant for us, but not them. And people are catching on to that and the hypocrisy. And that is going to have a backlash. And you're seeing the revolts and the backlash globally. They just haven't turned, extremely violent yet. But at some point, I think they're going to. But I do say by the 2016 election, yes, Hillary Clinton is going to win it. There is no election if you haven't figured it out. Obama might try to steal it from Hillary Clinton by a false flag of some sort. Again, all these coincidental terrorist attacks. But it has to be a big one to shut down the government and to get the martial law. New World Order plan with Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. If you don't know what those things are, trust me. There's over 40,000 references to Agenda 21 in Canadian environmental stuff. So, like the global climate change people, the carbon tax, all that stuff, it's a scam. The global warming thing is a scam. It's, again, even the IMF, the Rothschild IMF, saying this would be a great, with the global stagnation, you might as well say a depression in some countries, that it's a great time to have a global carbon tax or a wealth tax, a tax. So you're going to tax people that can't even find good jobs. Yeah, that makes like tons of sense. So yeah, it's just going to fail miserably. Now the problem with it failing miserably is who's going to hurt the most, us or the elites? Well, it's going to be us. But we're going to see bailouts. So the elites are already talking about banker bail-ins. That is the new bailout. And and if it were to go, if some banks were to go today, you would get 6 cents on the dollar in some areas, maybe 2 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar you have, that's how much you would lose. Like the 2008 collapse was a speed bump. The next collapse, which they keep pushing off, and the further they kick this can down the road, and they're going to keep doing that. I still say there will be no economic collapse, full-out collapse, until war comes, unless they can blame it on something else. Again, right now, so one of my subscribers is telling me that they're blaming the Fort McMurray fires on global warming. I mean, there's still snow on the ground here. Yes, there's dry conditions, sure, but there's a lot of other things to factor in. Like around here, you got spruce bugs that killed the pine trees, leaving a lot of. And you don't have people clearing things. Same in California. They used to clear all the old dead growth so that you could at least keep your communities more fire resistant. In case a fire did break out, there was less materials to burn. They don't do these programs anymore. They should do them in every country with boreal forest. You know what I mean, or any sort of around civilized areas. Cut all the old growth stuff, all the dead stuff, the old dry grass. That's why we burn our grass early spring, just before the snow is gone in the bush. As soon as we see a spot where we burn the grass. Now it's green. There's no dead stuff there. So it just takes away, these are things, these are basically forest conservation things that can be done to avoid big fires like this. Will you ever get it all? No, but you can at least have an area that, okay, well, get a ring around the city so that if a major fire like this did break out naturally, and lightning strikes, whatever, but this one has to be man-made because there was no lightning or nothing out there in Fort McMurray. But just look at the area it started in. It's not a farmer's field where the farmer burnt a bale of hay at the wrong time of year and it got away on him. That happens around here almost every year, a couple of times a year. And usually, a lot of times, it was a farmer burned his old bale of hay and it caught the grass and the way it went, and burnt it on a windy day and he was stupid. That type of, those things happen. Okay, that type of thing. But this one, it's like the origins of the fire. Nobody really knows yet, or nobody's saying. But global warming, no, that is not the reason for it. It was set somehow. But the thing is the area it was set in, maybe by coincidence, but boy, is this ever a beneficial coincidence, not to the common person, but to the oil, to Saudi Arabia. They're going to benefit from this for sure. Because now, with all that oil being pumped, keeping the gas pumps prices so low, yeah. They're still over $1 in most places, 90 some odd cents. That's not a drop. For how much the oil dropped in price, we should be seeing like 45 cents a liter, or whatever. But it's like, no, it's like it's almost as high as it's ever been. But now it's going to go crazy high. Why? We just wiped out pretty much our oil production. We're going to not necessarily have an oil shortage here, but we're buying oil from over there. So anyway, that's what's going to happen here in Canada, in my prediction. We'll have to watch and see. But there is going to be drastic effects going on here in Canada with the Fort McMurray thing. That's going to trickle through the entire country. Buy stuff now while it's cheap. Buy food now while it's cheap. Get what you need. I'm not saying it's gloom and doom, but it's good to be prepared for these things. The China thing with Saudi Arabia, we'll have to watch how they're... because what will probably happen is you'll see Iran will start mellowing out with the Houthis. The Houthis will be defeated by Saudi Arabia, but only when the deal between China, Russia, and Iran and Saudi Arabia is probably... Again, the Saudis were probably haggling to get a safety net before they ditch the US dollar. They know what happened to Saddam Hussein 4 days after he ditched the US dollar. They know what happened to Muammar Gaddafi talking about a gold-backed dinar. They know what happens when a country ditches the US dollar. That country gets a dose of democracy, JDAMs. Now, many Americans understand this, and they're preparing wisely, and they should. And I know most of my viewers are American, and no, I don't hate American people. You're my brothers and sisters. You're the same freaking people. You just don't have as cool as an accent. That's all. Not everybody can be Canadian, eh? You guys say huh. We say a. A comes before huh. Yes. I'm just kidding with you. But no, I do know a lot of some of my American viewers take it personally as I'm attacking them. No, I'm attacking your government. I'm attacking U.S. foreign policy. I'm attacking the central bankers. I'm attacking the corrupt elites up here, not the people. I'm telling the people down here, you guys are, most of you are in the same boat I'm in. You know, you live the same kind of life. You shit the same way I do. Most of you people are the same as me. And what I'm telling you is this is what I'm doing. Put food away. Make sure you take care of yourself. Anyway, I'm running out of time, but it's not against the people, it's against the governments. It's against U.S. foreign policy, Israeli policy, central bankers, etc., the corrupt world elites. They need to be held accountable. Anyway, that's that. If you like this kind of content, please consider making donations to the channel. Links down below. Thank you so much to everybody who has. If you want to make a couple of bucks for yourself, check out my TSU link. It's also down below, and it doesn't cost you anything to join up, and it's a lot of fun. It works a lot like Facebook and stuff like that, and you can basically, post pictures and memes and stuff like that. If you want to check out my WW3 updates Facebook page, you can post links and stuff like that. Some of you guys send me so many links and so fantastic. I can't get to them all, but man, they're all so good. But I really appreciate it if you could post the links for everybody to see, because even if I miss it, at least you guys, to me the message is much more important than the man who reports it. I'd rather you guys see it, even if I don't get to see it. I'd rather you guys just post it for everybody. I'd thank you very much if you could. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. On Twitter, I just posted this video on Twitter. I'm not active on Twitter, but it's notregme2 at Twitter. You can just, it's just to get in front of another audience, that type of thing. And you can share it on there too. The more that know, the merrier. A lot of people think everything I talk about is gloom and doom. I never say it's imminent. I just say we don't know, and we know that the people are crazy. But anyway, be true to yourself, be true to others, always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Eh? Good day, hi, and welcome. Well, World War III update. Looks like it's going to rain outside. I wish I could send that rain to you guys over there in Fort McMurray, but yeah, I can't. But anyway, yeah, just a little update on that. Yeah, that fire is now, I think, 1,000. So it's getting pretty big. And, well, it's not getting pretty big. That's pretty ginormous. It's probably the size of 10 times the size of Calgary right now. So to give you a kind of perspective, if you're in Ottawa, it'd be about 3 times the size of that. Ottawa's probably a bit bigger. I don't know, maybe Calgary's probably more spread out, I think. So maybe it's bigger than Ottawa. Trying to think geographically. It's been a long time since I've been in Calgary. It's expanded a lot since I last been there, so many decades ago. Anyway, yeah, so last night, jumping onto the World War III thing, I'll just jump right into what I already covered another video for all the details on it, but China's sending 5,000 troops to Syria to fight ISIS. This comes amidst a bunch of things that the U.S. was doing, preparing for the election or whatever. It sounded like there was going to be, from the U.S. side, they were hinting at kind of, and this is one thing John Kerry's very bad at, is always hinting at what they're going to do before they do it. And it gives China and Russia, maybe, like I say, maybe the world is a stage and they're just signaling so that you know well ahead of time so that you can, counter so we don't look bad. I don't know, but either way they look bad. So what they're saying is that, Obama sent in 250 troops, Navy SEALs. These guys are fighting with, supposed to be fighting with the Kurds. One has been killed so far. Now, he sent in another 250 troops. So I'm thinking what the Russians and Chinese are thinking is they're going to slowly saturate these troops. These troops, they're open-ended. They can stay there for indefinite. So now we have another U.S. soldier basically dead in a war over nothing. That the U.S. really has nothing to do. The world elite, there are no good guys in this. I know there's some people that want to go, no, well, these guys are the bad guys. No, they're all bad guys. All the governments in the world have failed the people. Every government in the world has failed the people miserably. Some more miserable than others. But there are no good guys, and that's what I mean by no good guys. And I'm usually talking about the governments, not the actual people of the place, because the people really, how much say do they really have, right? But that said, ISIS was getting its ass kicked pretty bad by Russia, enough to give the SAA, the Syrian Arab Army, more than almost 6 months of training or 4 months of training, a new weapon and equipment from Russia to Syria, and it seems like they can handle ISIS pretty good now. Daesh, ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them. They're all the same group anyway. They're all funded by the same people. We know that the Russians are really, there's a bit of a scramble for resources out there in Syria too. You have to understand that the Russians are taking strategic oil fields and stuff like that. And if the Russians have them, now the Chinese coming in, the Chinese are putting actual boots on the ground. God help the ISIS guys for that, right? Because the forces that they're sending in these guys are top notch. Now the thing is China's never really fought in a desert conflict. This is kind of why this is such a big thing. Is naming the last time China's invaded another country, or basically put boots on the ground in a foreign policy dispute. It's very, very rare for China to do this. They tend to play their cards close to their chest and very covert. They usually, yes, they've been in on this all along. They've been sending weapons to Saudi Arabia to fight the Houthis, which is kind of a strange thing going on because on the back end you have Iran and Russia helping them, arming the Houthis to destabilize Saudi Arabia. So why destabilize Saudi Arabia? Well, this is where the Chinese card kind of comes in. China has lots of investments in oil in Saudi Arabia. The fields that China is invested in is in this disputed area. Now, I'm thinking the Chinese are doing a long con on this as well. I think what happened, this goes back to 2012 when the Saudis said that they would be selling oil outside the US dollar, in other words, a threat to the petrodollar. Threatening the petrodollar gets your country blown up. That's what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. They didn't overthrow him for the women and children and democracy and because he was a dictator. They did it because he was going to go to a gold-backed dinar and, the giant aquifer and pump water throughout the Middle East, which, God forbid, would stabilize the region. And he was going to do all kinds of stuff like that. In other words, it would have been a threat to the petrodollar. If you understand the petrodollar, you understand a debt-based economy. Debt and debt-based economy is all the United States has left. Most Americans are waking up to this fact, and they understand it now. More and more are understanding it now because it's becoming more clearer to vision. It's even on to the point where it's becoming more mainstream. They're talking about economic collapse more frequently on. It's getting impossible to hide the collapse. People are starting to notice that they're more poor. Job losses are in the astronomical. Even some people are suggesting what's going on in Fort McMurray right now, which I will tie that in with the oil. It just, even Alberta, the oil fields around BC, apparently the fire's heading that way. I'm thinking arson probably might have something to do with this. It just comes at a time when Saudi Arabia pumping so much oil on purpose to destabilize basically Iran and Russia, because they were exporting more oil. Particularly exporting oil to Europe from Gazprom from Russia. And you have to understand, Syria is more of a war against Russia and China than and Iran to a degree too, because Iran is a stepping stone to attack China. I know it. You have to follow this channel for a while to but if I keep going over the same thing over and over, at this point you should know this. But if you don't be afraid to go over some of my older World War III updates, because it explains that. But Iran is the stepping stone. This goes back to the 2009 when what the heck, the CIA director there was out there on TV saying, yeah, we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years or whatever. And Syria is the holdup right now. And when Syria falls, Iran is next. That's why there's so much rhetoric to get us into a war with Iran. Iran hasn't attacked another country in over 200 years. Their threats towards Israel it's mutual. I mean, Israel's constantly talking about preemptively striking Iran. Iran says, well, we'll wipe you off the map if you do. chicken and egg, right? Who started it? Doesn't matter. But the thing is until Israel makes that preemptive strike against Iran, which is a death sentence to Israel, Iran is now in a position where that is almost off the table for the Israelis. They don't need nuclear weapons in Iran to wipe Israel off the map. They could do it in 5 minutes if they wanted. They've got the underground bunkers. They're 1,500 feet down, 500 feet long. There's no bunker busters or nukes